So here's another one. This time we got the McNees, and I got this pretty recently as well. Got the frag scales, a little neater than the plain flat titanium. The one I really wanted though, which I couldn't find, unless I wanted to pay way too much, was this style, which they call the jigged titanium. They're both pretty cool, but I got this one for a good price, so it was definitely my second choice. Pretty close to first, but I really wanted this version. And right after I got this, of course, the clone people that I buy from AliExpress, they had dropped this guy in this version and the plain titanium, and I figured, well, I'll get the jigged version on the cheap end. And honestly, it's pretty nice. You can hear the difference. This one definitely sounds a little cheaper. You can see the difference in the thickness of the blade and the thumb studs on the original, the OG, and the clone. Clone looks, thumb studs are smaller. Blade stock thickness is much thinner on the clone. And let's see what that's sitting at. .5 on the clone. Let me get it on there. And we're at 3.8 on the OG. Huh. So not a lot different, at least not with the caliper, but in person it's pretty significant looking. But this one is also, the clone is also chamfered slightly on the top, on the spine of the blade. I don't know if you can kind of make it out. There's an additional chamfer on this area, which this one does not have, the original. Which is going to make this look thinner when you look at it, especially in this direction. Other obvious differences that I noticed right off the bat was the cutoff, or the cutout for the lock. See, it's much finer cut on the clone than on the OG. These are both supposedly Mac2 2.5 inch. Same size. And I know the OG, or the Mac 1s, had a thinner cutout like this one, like this clone does. So I thought, well, maybe the clone is trying to take after the Mac 1s instead of the Mac 2s, because the Mac 2s had the wider cuts. But no, it's supposed to be the Mac 2, which the proportions and everything else match up, so it's just the difference. I actually much prefer that on the clone in this case. Pocket clips, there's slight differences. Main difference with the pocket clip you can see is in the height. You can see the height of the clone pocket clip is much lower than the OG, which I actually prefer this. This is kind of a fat gap for a pocket clip. Hardware is different. It's always different on the clones. Not as noticeable on this one though, I would say. I mean, obviously the pivot is probably the most obvious difference in hardware, which is hard to tell here, but it's deeper. The cut is deeper on the OG than it is on the clone. Also, the clone sits a little more proud of the scale. You can see there the screw itself is sticking up a little higher. But the action is impressively similar, I will say. The edge as well looks really nice on this clone. It's really sharp. Not quite scary sharp, but it is sharp, sharp. It's definitely been stropped. This one I had to touch up after I got it. You can see I put a little scratch in the blade doing that, so that sucks. But oh well, I'm not planning on selling any of this. But this from the factory being a clone, I mean, the edges on some of these clones have just been same on this cement or this the other one, the one I did the last video on, the Amazon. The edges on these have been really good. But yeah, so I mean, it definitely feels a little rougher. It's already starting to go away as I use it. As far as the action on the clone, looks like the cutouts for the thumb is a little different near the lock bar. The relief for the lock, it looks about the same. Check handle thickness anyways, since we have this thing out. Let's see, handle thickness on the OG. Handle scale thickness, of course this is going to be affected by the milling as well. 3.7 on the OG. Handle scales look like they're probably about the same. I would say the clone feels a little thinner. Just a little thinner on the handle scales. Overall, I'm going to avoid the actual pivot screw and just go to 12.5. 12.5 on the OG. And yeah, I think the milling might be affecting this some, but 11.7 on the clone. So it's definitely a little thinner all around. But the important thing, the action and the sharpness feels really good. I'm noticing now too the finishing on the blade. Of course the lettering is different. On the clone it's almost shiny. It's almost gold colored in person. Whereas on the OG is not shiny at all. It's like a matte flat black. So using different laser processes to etch these. This one also, which you can see here, there's an F on the OG right there that indicates that this is a flat ground blade. And there's the Magna Cut when it says right there. This has the Magna Cut as well. Same shiny. Does not have the F. But looking at it, it still looks like it's flat ground. So they just didn't put that part on there. Jimping on the spine looks the same. Maybe a little deeper on the OG. Biggest difference about the spine is the fact that this has that extra chamfer pass on the top, which is actually more work, but and it looks like the finish, you see the grind lines are a little different. They're a little more sharp on this one, the OG. This one they're a little softer. Kind of see clearer edges on this as opposed to this. The actual, I think it's, what is it, apocalyptic, or something like an apocalyptic finish on this is also a lot, not a lot, but it's noticeably harsher. This is a little smoother, a little more even. Honestly, a lot of things I kind of like about the clone. Again, I hate to be a clone proponent, but honestly, when more of these I buy, I feel like you're gonna buy this new, you're at what, 550, 600? This new was 75 given. It was from China. You know, it took what, 3 weeks, I think, 3 or 4 weeks to get. And apparently a lot of people are running into problems getting these. They're running into customs issues, especially right now. And I would never say to support a clone over the OG, especially McNees. He's apparently a really good guy. Really stand-up dude in the knife community. And you should always support the original maker before you support the clone. But it is interesting, it is impressive It's not so impressive when you consider the kind of machines that they have for these Chinese manufacturers, but they do get a lot of the little stuff right. Now, the sound is not one of them, but this OG has also been tuned by me a couple times now. It's to a point where I really like this thing, and I end up carrying it more than my Umnumzon clone lately, just because it's a little shorter, but you still get, and in fact I kind of like, I mean the blade is cooler looking on this. I love that harpoon, but I like the thicker, wider blade. So I a lot of times end up carrying this, and then I also started carrying my actual Chris Reeve, the Tonto. I started carrying this more too, just because the action really is, it's just nicer. And I also noticed the more I've used this thing, the later that lockup is getting. It's more towards 60 to 70% in, whereas when I got it, it was 20 to 30. I also tightened up the lock bar a little bit, but shouldn't have made that big of a difference. This thing has stayed solidly 50%. No matter how many times I flick it, it hasn't moved. So again, you're getting a clone. You should expect that. But one thing that you can't see a lot of times, which they do show you this thing taken apart on the ad on AliExpress, but I want to do it myself and see where we're sitting as far as fit and finish on the inside. We're working with thread lock or not. Felt like that might have had a little bit. Yeah, a little bit light thread lock. This one also feels a little, it almost felt a little loose. Oh yeah, that pivot was loose. That pivot was not even hand tight. Okay, that was probably the issue. All right, I mean, I guess I could take them both apart just to compare them straight up. So we'll have the OG on the right and the clone stuff on the left. They use the exact same size. It's actually kind of nice. The OG, I've had to use another wrench on the other side to hold that pivot before. I'm not having to do that this time though. I did recently re-Loctite this one. Oh, I'm taking it off the wrong way. That's right, I forgot about that. These ones, well, we'll find out if that's the same with the clone. But this one, the head of the screw comes out on the lock side. Clone is not that way. Looks like the head of the screw comes off the same size as the other ones, which is what I prefer. So you can see in the clone we got some a lot of skeletonizing inside the scale. Actually looks really nice. It's like it's got the same finish on the inside too. It looks like they might tumble these with the blade, I wonder. And then let's see, we can compare it with this guy, although I have to take these off on this guy, which I'm going to put these back in since I've never taken these out yet. On this side, it's kind of nice they use the same, well, the same Torx bit anyway. It's not necessarily the same size hardware, but it makes this a little easier. So this one, I'm trying to take apart all of the screws from one side. I didn't think I Loctited those, but those definitely feel, yeah, they're Loctited for sure. Alright, so anyway, so we're going to be doing this a little different, but this is the way that the McNees, the OG, is meant to be taken apart, because put the screw through the other end. So you can see the skeletonizing on this handle, which we're on the other side here, but it's a little different. It looks like most of my thread lock ended up getting in the pivot. That's always nice. See if we can't wipe that off. Jesus. Okay. And that was something I was curious about, taking this thing apart, which I've heard comments on these McNees having kind of anemic stop pins, and I would have to agree, especially now seeing it in person, or seeing it up close, compared to the clone. The clone has a much thicker stop pin. In fact, let's see what the measurement is here. 3 millimeters on the clone for the stop pin, and wow, 2.4 on the OG. Also, the clone has what looks like these style bearings, which has the brass collars, whatever the hell you want to call them, the brass followers. And the OG has the cheaper plastic and the bearing collars. There you can see a little, now I can see a little better as far as the difference in the milling within the scale. You can see it there. Basically the same. Although in person it's very obvious. You can see these tooling marks. You can see them here too. Tooling marks in the OG. Whereas the clone has no tooling marks. So I wonder if that, and it's definitely not cast, but it almost looks cast. Interesting. There's a little chamfer around this lanyard hole too on the OG that's not on the clone. The stop pin size is kind of surprising. Now, is the bearing size, the bearing's the same size, I wonder. It looks like the pivot is. That was one thing I thought was kind of interesting about this McNees when I got it, is the bearing doesn't really fit perfectly around the pivot pin, which is obviously is of no consequence, but it's just something I noticed. But it's the same. It looks like it's the same exact size bearing. Well, no. The OG looks like it's almost a little smaller around. If only I had a caliper or something near me that I could test that. Let's see what we got here. I'll put that in the meat. 9.5 OD in the clone bearing. Oh yeah, 8.9 OD on the OG bearing. The inner diameter, let's see if I can get that with this thing. 5 ID, right? 5. 4.9. More like 4.9 on the clone. ID, and what are we at? 4.6 on the OG ID. Huh. Okay. So I'm gonna have to give the bearing to the to the clone, and also if you look at this, you can see that we have a insert in the clone. This is the OG here. You can tell by the stop pin. Oh, and the bearing. Yeah, looks like they have a nicely machined, perfectly fit stainless steel insert on the clone, which doesn't really show any signs of it on this side, aside from the little hole. You can see the over travel stop down there, which you do not have. So it does have, it's an over travel stop, stainless steel insert, and it holds the oh god, what is that? The ball. The detent ball, whereas the OG does not have any of that. It just has the detent ball. And you can see here where it looks like the lock bar face is already wearing down from use. It's rounded. You see that by the light bouncing off it. It's rounded around the corner. And that's why you put a stainless steel lock bar insert on knives, especially titanium frame locks when they're locking in stainless steel. So I would say I'm pretty disappointed to see that the clone can do that while the OG can't. It's like, come on, you're paying a lot of money for this. It should have an insert at least. I've noticed this also with the Chris Reeves. It doesn't have an insert. It's like, for that kind of money, an insert should be, I mean, it's almost expected in any knife over $100 anywhere else. And you're talking about the high dollar semi-custom market, and it's not present, so I don't know. why they get to make that excuse, whatever. People still buy them, so. But I gotta say, after looking at this, if I were to look at these unbiased and didn't know what the hell I was looking at, I would have absolutely said that this clone is the more expensive knife. The machining tolerances are all there. In fact, I mean, I will say I like the look of the machine lines on the OG. I like that, and it just kind of proves, you know, that it was machined. But arguably, this is the better product. As far as that, you know, as far as finishing anyways. It's cleaner. It does look cheaper, just because, you know, we know what this means. Oh, they're throwing it like that. I just realized this thing's got the clone. I just tossed this little washer out. So it does have steel washer inserts inside the titanium handles as well, which, I mean, God, I hope the OG has those. I can't tell. You would hope for sure that it would have those, but I know apparently the McNees, I don't remember his first name, has said in the past that you should not be upgrading the bearings with other bearings because skiff bearings apparently are harder than the bearings they use, the ball bearing balls. But I don't know, that doesn't look like it has a collar in it. I think that's just... So the OG does not have steel washers inside the titanium to protect the handle scales from the bearings. Yeah, I can even see the grooves dug in there pretty good. Huh. That's actually pretty disappointing. I didn't even realize that. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm fucking jabbing the camera here. I'm just cleaning the lube off of this pivot screw for the OG. Putting this back in, putting the bearing back on. Drop a little oil in there. I'm gonna get them mixed up here. I can already feel it. Okay, this is the OG blade. Let's see if I notice any weird differences on this guy. See the finishing. It's not polished, but it is finished nice. You see the detent ramp there. Let's see, we got no detent ramp on the clone. You can tell it's a clone by the shiny. No detent ramp and no polishing of the surface where the bearing meets the blade. So the clone's losing out on that one. Detent ramp is kind of... It's one of those things, some people like them, some people don't. I tend to like a stiffer detent a lot of times. You can see the choil too, the sharpening choil on the OG is a lot deeper than the choil on the clone. So you're going to be running out of blade on the clone as far as the sharpening choil. A lot quicker than the OG. Okay. I'm going to say the lack of a detent ramp on the clone is, I mean, just by feeling the action, it really doesn't make a huge difference. We'll see when I get it back, put it back together, but so far in use, you can see the wear mark on the blade as well for the OG right here. Obviously it's not on this one, it's barely been used. But it's not, you can't feel it, obviously, because the wear is all happening on the handle scale, which is that right there, because there's no insert. I wish of all things that they did do is they should have at least put an insert. And honestly, you should easily be able to put a washer in there. I mean, come on, guys. Clone does. You got a stainless washer just chilling, taking all of that friction from the bearing. I think that should be pretty obvious on a knife like this, but I mean, I'm not really a professional knife maker, but I like to act like one. So let's see, we'll put the stop pin on this side. A much smaller stop pin, I should say. Bearing back on this side, and this looks like the bearing doesn't matter. These metal ones have an orientation because of how they're made. Plastic ones don't seem to matter. Alright, I think that's everything on the OG. Button it back up. I feel like I'm doing something wrong because it doesn't have the nicer bearings. It's kind of funny. I feel like I'm getting it mixed up, but I'm not. I'm not going to tighten this. I'm just going to kind of get it lined up and then try and pop it. There we go. Pop it into place. Hold it together. Okay, we'll put our screws back. That Loctite still, no, something else going on here. Okay. The OG, or the original Macs, I guess the one side came off as far as the scale, and the other side actually threaded into the other handle scale, which is kind of a big no-no. Because you don't want to thread steel, which your hardware is typically steel, into titanium. For a similar reason, issue that I'm having now, which I'm hoping is just thread lock. But this guy is not wanting to seat. I don't think they're different lengths. There it goes. I just felt to get past the thread lock. Okay. So that's the OG reassembled. Check the tension. Did oil both bearings. Centering. Oh, looks good. Action's still really good. Didn't feel quite as nice as when I took it apart initially, or before I took it apart initially, but it feels the same. Obviously, I mean, it didn't do anything. Just cleaned the damn thing. Okay, so let's get the clone back together. And after cleaning this, I'm expecting maybe a little bit smoother action. But honestly, I really didn't see any dirt in this thing. And usually when I put these metal bearings back in, I try to put this open end, as you can see it's in my hand, towards the handle. So I have the closed end towards the blade. I don't know if it matters, but I'm going to act like it does. Put the blade on. And again, open side out towards the handle. Put the lube right in there. Okay. And then of course this one I got to make sure and keep that little washer inside the handle scale, which it just fell out. So we'll go ahead and put that on the bearing first. Okay, we'll get the pivot started but not tight. Okay. And we'll get these other guys in there. I don't know. I think the I don't know. I'm starting to feel kind of biased now. Starting to feel like this clone is a little too good, especially for the money, considering this is $70. You're talking almost a tenth of this thing new. I didn't pay that. I didn't pay $600 for this. But I mean, the action is still, the centering is way off now. Oh, it's because I didn't tighten the pivot yet. That's right. Okay, there it is. There we go. I want it tight, but I want it snugged. I gotta say now, after taking it up, comparing these two and seeing this thing has no protection inside on the handle scales, I'm gonna try and keep this kind of, I don't know, not tight, I guess. So I'm gonna re-Loctite that for sure. Still sounds different. Huh. Definitely sounds nicer, the OG. But is it worth it? I don't know. Honestly, when you play with it as much as I do, I kinda, yeah, the action is, I mean, honestly, probably the most important part. But then again, this knife is also completely broken in. I bought it used. I've used it a lot. So is that one gonna get like this one once I break it in twice? I don't know. If it does, you know, if the action starts sounding just like the OG, or if the action on that one starts sounding and feeling just like this one, then I mean, honestly, I might just buy a couple more of these and mess with them, customize them or some shit. But the action is already superb on this thing. For a clone, I mean, geez. Don't get me wrong, this is nice. Beautiful action. Honestly, I think when this breaks in, I think it's going to be indistinguishable from this one. And, you know, the honest part of that is this is probably going to get carried more because it's cheaper. I don't want to lose this, break this. I know, I get it. It's a McNees. It's a hard use knife. Same with the the Umnumzon. It's a hard use knife. That's why you buy these ones. But I don't know. You know, I will say the cost is not necessarily justified. The cost difference. And of course, I understand the reasons for the cost difference. You're talking about a mass marketed company or mass producing company that makes these. I mean, they make no telling how many different types, different clones of knives. This guy is a dude, normal dude with his own little shop. You know, that's the American made thing. That's the American way, you know. But if you're just some guy working, you know, a normal ass job who doesn't have $500 to throw on one of these, get one of these. But I don't know. I still think this guy is supposed to get the support. He's the one who did all the work. These guys just copied it. But, you know, that's why these exist. And that's why they continue to exist. Every time one of these comes out, these are right behind them. Because there's a lot of people, well, like me now, who spend the money on the clones. And these are some of the first. It just sounds like crap compared to the OG, though. It just sounds cheap. Shit. Kind of reminds me of these. Amazon clone. Flicks easier, but it's just not the same. You can feel it. Ooh, took some fingernail with that one. Just feels soft. Something about the clones, and obviously because the materials are different, it just feels soft. The OGs, they feel better. They just feel cleaner, they're crisp. Again, maybe a lot of that is down to the breakdown, the break-in, I don't know. But I will say this is 90% of it. But I'm at a point now where I still want to get the OGs. Don't get me wrong. These are not souring me on the OGs. But I'm at a point where I almost will buy the clone first. Just to check it out. And when they're as good as these, like if I bought this clone first, I was probably most definitely going to get one of these. It's like it's like a introduction. It's like a test drive. You test drive the fake and then you go get the real one. But it's kind of interesting, comparing and contrasting. All right, thanks. Take it easy.